Hi there everyone, Lars here with another anime review brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends, and today I want to have a look at one of the aspects from the most recent episode of The Dangers in My Heart that I found absolutely spectacular and something that I think needs to be discussed more when it comes to writing, well, really good and realistic romance. And that aspect is when a character realizes, whoa, I've got a crush. This is kind of a weird thing right here because there are two extremes that most writers love to employ. We have the traditional, oh, it's love at first sight. It's the whole when the moon hits your eye whole thing going on right there. It's like Aladdin seeing Jasmine there in the marketplace, or is your usual fantasy fare. The next extreme, and this is one that is most beloved by especially writers of manga and anime, is when a character only realizes towards the end of a journey, oh, I actually really like this person. And we see this a whole lot in some of the older American rom-coms as well. We have all of these crazy shenanigans between these characters. They get into these weird moments. You're like, yep, of course you guys like each other. But they either don't realize it or they're not willing to accept it until towards the end they're like, wow, I really love this person. Now it's time for me to go and do a confession, and then the story usually ends with the confession. Again, this is very popular amongst mangaka and anime writers, and it was a really big trope, especially like in 90s American rom-coms. Most writers enjoy using these two tropes because either, one, it gets things going really fast and you can just jump right into the romance, or people really enjoy this because they're like, no, it's the journey towards them realizing that they have feelings and then acting on those feelings that really gets the blood pumping. However, I would argue that what is probably more enjoyable is when characters realize in a realistic and interesting and personal way that, oh, I've got feelings for someone else. Now then, this can actually go really bad if you, again, just are like, oh, I'm just going to shoehorn in that, oh, I have feelings. And this is why I contend that The Dangers in My Heart does this fantastically well. So within this episode, we have still more interactions between Ichikawa and Yamada, where you have all these little funny misunderstandings and little misadventures at the school that ultimately then lead to Ichikawa realizing what we, the audience, are realizing, that, oh, dude, you've got a crush. But what I like about this is the setup to it. Because you see, for almost 3 episodes, Ichikawa has been trying to convince himself that he is just this dark, angsty child who is going to bring death, murder, and change to the world. And Yamada is going to be one of his most prized victims. That by destroying her, he's going to bring about something, whether it be that somehow destroys society, or really more like it's that Ichikawa can finally prove to himself that he is this angsty, cruel, dark, evil person deep inside. And he's been trying to convince himself of this his entire time, and yet all of his interactions with Yamada have gone completely different from what he has imagined, and he continues to do good things for her despite his evil intentions. And in this episode, he's finally like, what is going on with me? Why is it that my thoughts, my actions are not matching up? This realization on Ichikawa's part is then paired off quite brilliantly with a very simple moment in high school. They're at PE, they're at physical education class. What is the sport today? It is basketball. Okay, everyone, you're going to play basketball. Ichikawa, being the angsty boy that he is, I'm not going to play. I'm going to sit in the corner and just think about destroying you all. And as he's there, the ball comes bouncing towards him, and he gets ready to just hurl it at whoever threw this ball at me while I'm in the throes of my evil thinking and contemplation. And it turns out to be Yamada. And he goes for it, and he's like, oh, well, here's the ball back. Again, completely incongruent with what he's been thinking, what he's been intending this entire time. He goes and he sits down, and he's looking at her, and he's wondering, what the heck is up with me? And then he realizes that she's looking at him, and he's like, oh, I kind of like this. Boom! Basketball smashes her in the face because she's not paying attention. Classic stuff that happens all the time in a typical PE class. She's got to go on over to the nurse's office because her nose is bleeding a whole ton. And I used to make fun of this as just like the whole anime, like every character's got like an entire swimming pool's worth of blood in them. Yet then again, after actually having to help a guy who had a really nasty nosebleed, I have seen this happen in real life. Anyway, tangent over. Ichikawa decides to check out what is going on. And as he sees her just in this very pitiful state, acting like a regular kid would, just crying and flustered, but also seeing a more mature side to her, that this isn't just, ow, I'm hurt and this is sad, but I hurt, this is sad, and I will no longer be able to do my photo shoot. I'm letting down my agent, I'm letting down my mother, I'm letting down myself. And suddenly all of these little things start coming together for Ichikawa, and he realizes, wow, Yamada is a little bit more mature than I gave her credit for after all this time. She is a thoughtful person. And I've realized now through many interactions with her, she's complex. I'm complex. She's beautiful. And oh crap, I like this girl. And this scene works so well because of the funny set up towards this moment that we have this brooding, angsty dark boy who has fallen for the beautiful, fluffy, ditzy model, and rather than playing it up as some sort of weird fantasy stereotype, as I said in my previous video on this show, it blends the realistic with the fantastical to tell a very engaging story, and these characters are written really engagingly well. And now, rather than just simply, okay then, we're going to play this up for laughs, we're going to do the whole will they, won't they, instead we're now going to a character having a very realistic moment of realizing, wow, I like this person. And again, it is paired off with this fantasy situation. No person's going to crawl under a bed while another person is in the sick bay crying with their nose bleeding and be like, oh wow, I like this person. Usually we would think that that's super creepy, and if we think about what's going on right here, yeah, this is a really weird scene. And yet it works because we've been in Ichikawa's head. We know what is going on with him there. And we realize, wow, he's having a moment. He's having a moment where it's not just simply realizing that, oh, I've got feelings for this person, but it's realizing I am not who exactly I thought I was. Now, the strength in approaching a romance story like this is as follows. Number one, you give your characters time to be who they are independent of a romance. That's one of the things that people I don't think realize when it comes to the whole like, wow, it's love at first sight. Because from that point on, the characters are heavily influenced by their feelings towards each other. And it's a lot of fun to explore who a character is outside of romance. Not everything has to be about the lovey-dovey, will they, won't they, will they kiss, will they go further. No, because life is about so much more, and there's so much more to a character than who they like. And so oftentimes we have to explore characters like that. And in a romance, when a romantic comedy or in a romantic drama, it's hard to get that because we're expecting the romance. Well, by having characters realize later on that they like each other, we get to know who they are outside of those feelings. So we've gotten that. But by not waiting until the very end for those feelings to be realized, this now means that we can transition to the hilarity, to the humor, and to the character growth that comes with navigating those feelings leading towards a relationship. Now, that might seem very straightforward, that might seem very formulaic, but it honestly isn't. It's kind of frustrating to have that kind of a realization happen within a story and without it feeling completely shoehorned in at this moment of like, well, I guess it's now time to get to the romance. How exactly do you do this organically? Well, it comes down to, again, understanding the characters, understanding what they're going through. And I think that, honestly, this, again, just works really well for Ichikawa because we have had plenty of time by now to see him as the angsty boy who thinks that he is Mr. Evil and that he's going to overthrow the world through murder and so forth. However, by now he has spent enough time with Yamada and with his classmates to see that that's not really the way that the world works, and that's really not the way that he himself works. And by spending enough time with Yamada, this person who he didn't understand, this person who he was even thinking of doing violence towards, he's gotten to know her well enough that he can actually have real feelings for her. This is a matter of time. And so again, this is not formulaic. This is the writer really exploring their characters and then capitalizing on a good moment to show that change. This is a moment where Yamada is at her absolute lowest. This is something that episode 1 Ichikawa should have been gloating over and be like, yes, yes, and because she was looking at me when it happened, I'm the one who did it, haha! Instead, he's like, oh my gosh, because she was looking at me, she got hurt. Oh, this is awful, and I don't want this to happen. You have that shift, you have that change, and so then it makes sense for him to then realize, oh my gosh, this must be, why am I feeling and thinking these things? It's because I actually have feelings for her. Oh boy, oh no. Where the story goes on from here is actually going to be a whole lot of fun. We've done the preliminary legwork. I've enjoyed this so far, but now it's time to get to the actual good rom-com goodness where the feelings are now realized, the feelings are there, and we're going to see how tons of misinteractions, miscommunications, and so forth are just going to fuel this funny, growing relationship between Ichikawa and Yamada. And we're going to get way more context clues to how Yamada feels about him and their situation as well. And so I want to end by coming back to what I've talked about already about a character realizing, oh, wait a second, I've got a crush right here. Why is this such a good route to go, especially when we have those two favored ways of doing things, either love at first sight or we're going to work really, really hard and really, really long for characters to suddenly realize their feelings and so on and so forth. And I think most writers are guilty. I'm guilty of going with those two extremes. Why then is it that most people don't go this particular route? I think it's because, in a way, it is kind of personal and embarrassing. If we take a moment to think back, well, what have our crushes been like? What is the beginning of our own romances been like? They've usually been rather mundane, rather silly, and rather revealing of who we are at that moment of when you're either sitting down at a desk in school, or you're hanging out with friends, or you're just alone by yourself and you're like, oh, wait a second. Oh no, I like so-and-so. Like when you're at school and you're at the desk and you look and you're like, wait a second. Oh my gosh, I'm looking at them and they're looking at me. Do they like me? Oh my gosh, no, I like them. Oh no. Or you're with your friends and you're like, I've been hanging out with this person for so long. There's no way that I could ever see them as anything other than a friend. Oh no, I actually see them as something more than a friend. Or you're just alone by yourself. You're doing something completely random and different. You could be working on your car. You could be making yourself some food. You're just vegging out in front of the television. And then suddenly you're like, I like so-and-so. Oh no. Those kinds of realizations, how do you write those? How do you accept that those things actually happened? It's so personal, it's so embarrassing. Gah! And yet they are real. They happen to everyone. Writing those moments, though it is difficult to make it feel natural, being able to actually see those within stories, I feel, is very rewarding because it is something that more people can actually identify with. And if done well, I think it actually brings out a whole lot more about who the characters are because we get to know them, who they are, pre-romance, and then we get to see who they become because of these romantic interactions or romantic thoughts. And that, I feel, is again just very rewarding to experience as a reader, as a viewer, and as a writer. So I'm going to stop with my gushing right here. This is something where I feel like I could just go off on way more tangents, but I'm going to stop it right here before I just go too far. So I hope that you found that little bit interesting, engaging, hopefully a little bit helpful. At least I hope it gets you thinking somewhat. As I said, it's kind of hard to actually really figure out how to write this because it's not formulaic. It's very personal. So you're going to have to figure this out with your characters if you decide to go this route. And it's one I hope that you will explore as a writer if you're going to write a romantic subplot or a romantic story, because I think it might end up being the most rewarding route to go. You don't have to take it, but it's an option I think you should keep open. So with that being said, if you're looking for more writing advice, please feel free to check out our other videos here on our channel. You can also head on over to our podcast, Camille's Harem, found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We have writing exercises for you to check out over at our Pinterest page. And if you would like to join our ever-growing community of novice authors, please subscribe, comment, share out this video, do whatever you got to do. You can also support us by checking out the books that we have published. We would really appreciate that. Links for all of that and more are in the description below. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.